So the problem that I'm pondering about is relatively easy. Is why isn't there more people that are multi-millionaires or even billionaires in this world? And the reason why I say it's relatively easy is mathematically it's actually easy. If you look at it and you look at what the average person brings in, and you look at sort of investment. Now, I'm not saying, okay, so let me take a step back. So the average income in a developed country, but not average in the sense of like the median household income, but in terms of, somebody that had an average professional degree, like nursing or something along those lines, like an education that's pretty solid. And why isn't there more people that are not multimillionaire to billionaires? Because the mathematics is actually quite easy. If you invested, I don't know, let's say it was $100,000 a year. And I know that seems outrageous for a lot of people, but let's just play with this. And you invested that for 30 years repeatedly, you would have millions and millions, at least without compound interest, it'd be like $3 million. But with compound interest, that's probably more like $100 million. Now, the question is why isn't, so there's two factors that are at play here, right? How much you actually invest, and then how long you actually invest for. And these two things are, the answer is a little bit more tricky, and why that is. And the answer is that we're people. And we live in a world where there's other people that exist. So why is this kind of like a tricky thing? What is going on here, right? So when I first proposed that, it seems outrageous, right? But if you were to have a job, I don't know, a nursing degree in a Western country, you will probably be making somewhere around that amount, right? If you were an engineer, you'd probably be making $150,000 a year, somewhere around that. And as you sort of progress, and that means to invest that much, you have to be living off of, less than $50,000 a year. And actually, if you think about it, it probably is quite plausible. There's this guy online, and I know that he's got a lot of followers. It's the Mr. Money Mustache. And that's the basic principle of what he did, right? He's an engineer, and he ended up retiring at the age of like 45 or something like that. And he essentially just lives below his means, but at an extreme level, and had a significant amount of money coming in for a while, and invested all of that in just plain old index funds and mutual funds. In fact, if you just did an index fund, that would be totally fine. And it would be risky, but not necessarily, completely crazy risky. That's not really crazy risky. So that's the kicker is doing that requires you to have a lot of humility, to have a lot of, I don't care about the rest of the world, have a lot of, I'm perfectly good with who I am, have a lot of all of those things, the sort of, not only the psychology of things, but also the sociology of things, right? So you also have to be in the right circumstance, that you had parents that sort of pushed you in that direction, that you had a community that had resources to support this. A funny story, I was just in Italy, and so in America and in Canada and in the UK, there's public washrooms all over the place, and you can go in them for free. But in Italy, you can't. You have to pay for all of the washrooms, all of the restrooms that exist. And so you have to pay, and that would eat into some of that ability to do that, right? So what you'd have to do is use a lot of public bathrooms, shower in public stalls, all those kind of things that seem not necessarily something that you would do as somebody that makes that much amount of money. And you would have to do that for such a long period of time that essentially people would question who you are, right? They would question everything about you. Imagine if one of your colleagues did this, right? So maybe you are, maybe you're an engineer, for example, right? Or an architect. And you had a colleague that made as much as you did, but never drove anywhere, rode around on a bike, ate peanut butter sandwiches every single day, and lived in a tent. And now, of course, you would question their judgment. You would question everything about them. And you would say, hey, well, that's really, really silly what they're doing. But essentially, that's what you would have to do. Now, that's the extreme case, right? And you would have an unbelievable amount of money by the time you actually did this. And if you're wise with your money, and that is conditional on a lot of things, right? Like being wise with your money to know to invest in index funds, or something along those lines. Mutual funds requires a significant education, to not fall for all of the traps that are out there. And you would also have to know to get life insurance and all those kind of things just to protect yourself. So it is a conundrum, right? So that's one side of the story. You'd have sort of essentially obscene amount of wealth at the end of it by doing this. By the time that you actually passed away, it would be just ridiculous. On the other side, most people, and this is where most people actually sort of are situated, you have a significant income that comes in, and all of it goes out the door to various different, whether it's services or you're paying, the vast majority of it goes to, for a typical Western person, would go towards transportation. That's like a car, that we always have to have some sort of new car. And the vast majority of it also goes to paying off banks for mortgages and things like that. Now, my wife and I, we worked really hard and we were able to pay off our mortgage by the time we were 40. And that was our goal, or maybe my goal. I think she was along for the ride as well. So we did all of that kind of stuff, but that required us to live a bit weird, given with who we actually were. Now, it was okay because I'm a professor and people are okay with professors being weird. But, everybody else, that is a challenging thing to face because we always want to show to others that, we're going on the next best trip. We are getting the most beautiful cars, for example, that we have all of the most recent clothing, all of that stuff. Every single thing of it, that sort of signaling part of it, is very human. Why we actually do this stuff. We sort of signal to other people that we fit in, that we belong, and we have this sort of longingness that other people believe that we fit in more than everybody else within the sort of community that you're part of. Now, the challenge is finding, so we have one extreme where you really never really get anywhere, and then finding that sort of happy medium between those two, right? That happy medium, I don't know what that is for everybody. It's kind of, there's not really a magical number what that is in terms of where you're situated, but it's far further away from the sort of norms of what people actually do, because there's a lot of life that goes on along the way that we can't anticipate. Now, there's this whole massive literature in psychology, or different domains, at how poor we are at judging things as human beings. Right? And the reason is, it's not necessarily that we're poor at doing that stuff. We're human beings. It's because the standard that we are judged against was a sort of robotic view of the world. And, psychologists and sociologists are always pushing back against that robotic view of the world. We're human beings. And the standard of what I'm suggesting is that we need to inch our way a little bit towards more of the robotic view, so that we have, just normatively as who we are as people, so that we actually have some savings, or we can be charitable, or just do fun things eventually, right? And there's this hard problem that everybody really can't, it's just really hard to sort of think about, is that all investment there's a slump at the beginning that requires a lot of just not feeling good. And how long is that slump at the beginning of not feeling good? Depending on how sort of big the investment is, it might be anywhere from 5 to 20 years of not feeling good. And that's like various different ways to define not feeling good, but essentially there's a lot of sacrifice that's involved. So the challenge is we're balancing this, as well as living with our own society, and living with who we actually are as human beings. How do we do this, right? And where do we sort of draw this level of where we want to go to? And I'm not suggesting that we all be like planners and ultra rational and all that kind of stuff. I don't think. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, first day of school. We just did that. So I'm not suggesting for us to be like planners and thinking so far out in the future. Well, that would be nice, but I just don't think that's what human beings do. What I'm suggesting is think about people in your immediate area, in your vicinity, that you think are financially responsible, or that you think they kind of have their act together, but they're giving signals that they're being more subtle. And that's the hard part, right? So what we love to do is we love to chase the people, and we like to mimic against those that seem very successful. But you have to look between the lines, and look at people that are actually quite modest. And you would never know, right? And that's a hard thing for us to think about as human beings, is looking for that modesty. And so what I'm suggesting is to mimic after those folks that are actually quite modest with who they are, and and given with, who they are or whatnot, right? Once you think about that, you'll understand what I'm saying, because that's pulling back from the norms of who we think human beings actually should be given their surrounding. And they're probably actually spending within their means, and they're living a life that they actually should, so that they can contribute and have a long, successful life. So, how do you identify those? They're going to be kind of the people that stand out. Now, they might not necessarily live in a tent, but they certainly will eat peanut butter sandwiches every day. And they will be somebody that you'll be like, well, they make a lot of money. How come they actually live a life like that? So then that's where you sort of triangulate yourself and think about how people are actually living and thinking about, and then mimicking after those people. And as you do that, as you mimic after those people that are actually quite modest with who they are, you will begin to live a life that is probably calibrated to where you should actually be with who you actually are. So thinking about how you can live more modestly so that you can live a long life. And the reason is that sort of problem of the trade-off, that there's this moment of suck, and that moment of suck is a long time, and then living through that moment of suck perpetually, so that in the long run, things are growing and things are doing really well. All right. And then that's where you find the happy medium, where you can, quote unquote, become a billionaire, whatever, but also not be perpetually broke for the rest of your life. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day.